What if the reason your body is holding onto fat has nothing to do with how much you eat, but when you eat? And what if giving your body a break from constant food is the exact signal it needs to finally let fat go? For years, we were told that skipping meals slows metabolism and makes fat loss harder, but science now shows the opposite can happen under the right conditions. Intermittent fasting doesn't just change your schedule, it changes how your body stores, protects, and releases fat. Here's what's really happening inside your body when you stop eating for a few hours. Every time you eat, your blood sugar rises. In response, your body releases insulin. Insulin's main job is to move sugar out of your blood and into cells for energy or storage. But insulin has another powerful effect that almost nobody talks about. It locks fat inside your fat cells. As long as insulin stays high, fat stays stored. In modern life, insulin rarely gets a break. Breakfast, snacks, lunch, snacks again, dinner, late night, eating your body is constantly in store mode. Fat loss becomes nearly impossible, not because you're eating too much, but because your body never gets permission to burn what it already has. This is where intermittent fasting changes the rules. When you stop eating for several hours, insulin levels begin to fall. Not immediately, but gradually. And once insulin drops low enough, a major shift happens. Your body switches from storage mode to access mode. This is the moment fat cells finally open. Stored fat is released into the bloodstream as fatty acids, where it can be used for energy. This doesn't happen because you're restarving. It happens because your hormones are finally aligned to burn fat. Another important change happens at the same time. Your body increases a hormone called glucagon. Glucagon is essentially insulin's opposite. While insulin stores energy, glucagon releases it. During fasting, glucagon tells your liver to tap into stored fuel and tells fat cells to let go. This hormonal shift is the real magic behind intermittent fasting, not calorie cutting, not willpower. As fasting continues, something even more interesting happens. Your body begins to use fat more efficiently. Enzymes involved in fat burning become more active. Mitochondria, the tiny energy factories inside your cells, start adapting to use fat as a preferred fuel. This is why many people report feeling mentally clearer during a fast. The brain loves stable fuel, and fat-derived energy provides that stability. But there's an important misconception to clear up. Intermittent fasting does not mean your body automatically burns muscle. In fact, short-term fasting often protects muscle by increasing growth hormone levels. Growth hormone rises during fasting to preserve lean tissue while encouraging fat use. This is why properly done fasting can reduce fat without the skinny fat look. At the same time, your body becomes more sensitive to insulin. When you do eat again, insulin works better, meaning less gets stored as fat. Over time, this improved insulin sensitivity makes it easier to maintain fat loss rather than constantly regain it. But fat storage isn't just about insulin and glucagon. Inflammation plays a huge role too. Frequent eating, especially processed foods, keeps inflammation elevated. Inflammation signals the body to store fat as a protective mechanism. During fasting periods, inflammation markers often decrease. The body feels safer, and when the body feels safe, it stops hoarding energy. This is especially important for belly fat, visceral fat. The dangerous fat around your organs is highly sensitive to hormonal signals. Lower insulin, lower inflammation, and better hormonal balance all target this fat first. This is why people practicing intermittent fasting often notice their waistline changing before the scale moves much. And perhaps the most overlooked benefit, fasting gives your digestive system a break. When digestion rests, energy is freed up for repair. Cells begin a process called autophagy, a kind of internal cleanup where damaged components are broken down and recycled. This doesn't just improve health, it improves metabolic efficiency, making fat burning smoother and more sustainable. So intermittent fasting doesn't force fat loss. It allows fat loss by removing the constant signals that tell your body to store, but timing, duration, and lifestyle matter, and fasting done wrong can backfire. Now here's where most people get confused and where intermittent fasting either becomes a powerful fat loss tool or completely fails. Because fasting alone doesn't guarantee fat loss. Your body is smart. It responds not just to when you eat, but to the overall message your lifestyle is sending. Let's talk about what decides whether fat is released or protected during intermittent fasting. First, stress. When stress is high, your body releases cortisol. Cortisol's job is to keep you alive during perceived danger. And one of the fastest ways cortisol protects you is by holding onto fat, especially around the belly. If you're fasting while under constant stress, poor sleep, work pressure, excessive caffeine, emotional strain, your body may interpret fasting as another stressor. In that case, cortisol rises, insulin sensitivity worsens, and fat storage can actually increase despite eating less. This is why some people say, "I fasted and nothing happened." The issue wasn't the fasting, it was the stress environment around it. Next is sleep. Fat storage hormones are deeply tied to circadian rhythm. When sleep is short or irregular, hunger hormones like ghrelin rise, while fullness hormones like leptin fall. This hormonal chaos makes the body defend fat, not release it. Intermittent fasting works best when the body is well rested. In fact, many people unknowingly break their fat-burning state by staying up late, not by eating too early. Another major factor is what happens when you break the fast. Your first meal sends a powerful signal. If it's mostly refined carbohydrates and sugar, insulin spikes sharply. Fat burning shuts down fast. But if the meal contains protein, fiber, and healthy fats, insulin rises slowly and remains controlled. This means fat burning doesn't instantly stop, it tapers gently. Protein is especially important. It tells your body that muscle is safe, metabolism doesn't need to slow, and fat can continue to be used for fuel. People who break fasts with adequate protein retain more muscle and lose more fat over time. Now, let's talk about fasting duration. Longer is not always better. For many adults, especially over 30 or 40, extremely long fasts can increase stress hormones and backfire. The most sustainable fat loss often comes from moderate fasting windows, long enough to lower insulin, but short enough to keep cortisol stable. This is why consistency beats intensity. A simple daily fasting pattern that fits your life sends a calm, repeatable message to your body. We're safe, energy is available. Fat can be released. That calm message is what unlocks fat loss. There's also something important happening in fat cells themselves. With repeated fasting cycles, fat cells become more flexible. They stop resisting release. Enzymes that break down stored fat become more active. This is metabolic adaptation in a positive direction, the opposite of what happens during chronic dieting. And unlike extreme calorie restriction, intermittent fasting doesn't constantly lower metabolic rate. In fact, short fasting periods can slightly increase norepinephrine, a hormone that raises fat burning and alertness. This explains why many people feel energized during fasting once their body adapts. But adaptation takes time. The first 1 to 2 weeks are not about fat loss, they're about fat access. Your body is relearning how to switch fuels. Hunger signals may feel stronger at first, not because you need food, but because insulin is dropping and fat-burning pathways are waking up. This phase is temporary. Once adaptation happens, hunger becomes calmer and more predictable. Energy stabilizes. Cravings weaken. Fat loss becomes easier, not harder. However, there is one more crucial piece most people miss, and it's the difference between fat loss and weight loss. Intermittent fasting is not about seeing the scale drop fast. Early weight changes are often water and glycogen. Real fat loss shows up in waist measurements, clothing, fit, and body composition. If you chase the scale, you may sabotage the process. Now, let's talk about the part everyone really cares about: stubborn fat. The belly fat that doesn't move. The fat that stays even when you eat clean. The fat that feels like it's been glued to your body for years. This is where intermittent fasting quietly changes things in a way most people never realize. Stubborn fat is not just extra calories. It's hormonally protected fat. These fat cells have more insulin receptors and are more sensitive to cortisol. That's why they so hard to lose. They literally designed to resist being burned. When insulin stays high throughout the day, these fat cells remain locked. They don't release energy. They just sit there, waiting. Intermittent fasting changes this environment. Over weeks of consistent fasting, insulin levels stay low for longer periods each day. This creates something powerful: fat accessibility. Those stubborn fat cells finally get the signal that stored energy is needed. At the same time, growth hormone increases during fasting. Growth hormone protects muscle while encouraging fat breakdown. This is one reason people often lose inches without looking smaller or weaker. Your body becomes better at pulling energy from fat, not just during the fast, but even after meals. This metabolic flexibility is the real secret behind long-term fat loss. Another key change happens in your liver. The liver acts as a metabolic switchboard. When it's overloaded with sugar and constant meals, it prioritizes storage. But during fasting, liver glycogen drops and fat oxidation rises. Over time, this reduces fatty liver buildup, improves insulin sensitivity, and lowers the tendency to store fat after eating. This is also why many people notice improvements in blood sugar, triglycerides, and cholesterol. Not because they ate less, but because their metabolism became more efficient. Now, let's talk about why intermittent fasting helps prevent fat regain. Traditional dieting lowers calories every day. The body adapts by slowing metabolism, increasing hunger, and making fat storage more efficient. When the diet ends, weight comes back fast, often more than before. Intermittent fasting works differently. Instead of constantly restricting, it alternates between feeding and fasting. This rhythm prevents the body from entering long-term starvation mode. Hormones stay responsive. Metabolic rate stays more stable. Your body doesn't feel deprived, it feels organized. That's why people who use intermittent fasting properly often say something surprising. "I'm not fighting my body anymore." And that's the real win. But intermittent fasting is not magic. It can fail if it's paired with chronic stress, poor sleep, under-eating protein, or binge-style eating during feeding windows. The goal is not to starve. The goal is to train your metabolism. When done right, intermittent fasting teaches your body to burn fat when food isn't present, use food efficiently when it is, protect muscle, regulate hunger naturally. Over months, fat storage patterns change. Fat cells shrink. Insulin sensitivity improves. Cravings fade. Energy becomes steady instead of spiking and crashing. This is why intermittent fasting feels slow at first and then suddenly feels easy. And one last important point: fasting is not a lifetime prison. It's a metabolic reset. Many people eventually move into more flexible eating patterns while maintaining the benefits. The body remembers how to burn fat. That's the real science behind what happens to fat storage with intermittent fasting. Not hype, not shortcuts, but biology working the way it was designed to. So when people ask, what really happens to your body fat with intermittent fasting? The honest answer is this: your body stops panicking and starts trusting itself again. Fat loss stops being a daily fight. Hunger stops controlling your decisions. Energy stops crashing midday, not because you found a trick, but because you removed the constant signal to store it. Intermittent fasting doesn't force fat to disappear overnight. It changes the environment that created the fat in the first place. Lower insulin, better hormone balance, a metabolism that knows how to switch between fuel sources instead of clinging to every calorie. And that's why the most powerful change isn't just what you see in the mirror. It's what you feel. Clearer thinking, Stable energy, less obsession with food, more control. But remember this, fasting is a tool, not a punishment. When paired with real food, enough protein, good sleep, and lower stress, it becomes sustainable. When done aggressively or emotionally, it backfires. The goal isn't to eat less forever. The goal is to teach your body that it's safe to burn fat again. And once your body remembers that, fat storage loses its grip. If this helped you understand your body in a new way, stay curious. The more you work with your biology instead of against it, the easier health becomes. That's how real, lasting fat loss happens quietly, steadily, and without fighting yourself every single day.